In the quiet hush of a small town church, where the scent of wooden pews and flickering candle wax lingers in the air, a little girl knelt alone in the front row. Her hands were clasped tightly, and her voice was barely more than a whisper. Yet her prayer carried the weight of her entire world. God, I just want a dad for mommy. She didn't ask for toys or sweets, nor for riches or fame. All she wanted was someone who would love her mother, a woman who had weathered the storms of life with quiet strength, raising her daughter alone with grace and unwavering kindness. Unbeknownst to her, in one of the back pews, a man sat silently, listening. He wasn't a regular in this church. In fact, he wasn't from this town at all. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, the kind that didn't quite fit into the modest surroundings, he had come seeking solitude and something he couldn't quite name. He was a man of immense wealth, success, and worldly acclaim, but his heart had grown tired. The glitter of luxury had long lost its shine, and he had come to the church hoping for peace, or maybe redemption. Her voice trembled as she continued, "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She smiles all day, but I know she's lonely. She works so hard and never asks for anything. If I could give her a dad, I would. But I'm just a kid, and I don't know how. So, maybe you can." The man's breath caught in his throat. He had heard business pitches worth billions, political speeches that moved crowds, and operas sung by the world's finest, but nothing had touched him like the innocent honesty of this child's plea. After the prayer, the girl rose, brushed her dress, and walked back to her mother, who was lighting a candle in the corner of the sanctuary. She was beautiful, not in the glossy magazine way, but in the way flowers bloom in sunlight. There was warmth in her eyes and gentleness in the way she held her daughter's hand. The man watched as they smiled at each other, walked down the aisle, and left into the cold evening. He didn't follow them that day. Instead, he sat still for a long time, letting the prayer echo in his mind. The words stayed with him that night, and the next, and for many nights after. Something in him shifted, like a forgotten part of his soul had stirred awake. Days turned into weeks, but he returned to the church often, each time hoping to see them again. And eventually, he did. It was a Sunday morning when he saw them walk in once more, same pew, same grace, same quiet strength. He sat near enough to observe but far enough not to intrude. After the service, he waited outside, his heart pounding like a boy with a schoolyard crush. "Excuse me," he finally said, approaching gently. "I think we've both found something special in this church." The woman smiled, cautiously polite. "We come here often. It gives us peace." "My name is Ethan," he said, extending a hand. "I'm just passing through, but I was moved by your daughter. She has a beautiful soul." "She does," the woman replied, her eyes softening. "I'm Anna." Their conversation was simple at first. Courteous smiles, small talk about the weather, how the church choir sounded that day. But as time passed, their paths began to cross more often. Ethan found himself extending his stay in town. He no longer rushed back to boardrooms and skyscrapers. He rented a modest home near the town square and started attending the church every Sunday, not for God at first, but for the little girl who prayed with such faith and the woman whose presence soothed something inside him. He learned that Anna was a nurse, working double shifts to support her daughter. That her husband had passed away in a car accident years ago. That she'd never remarried, not because she didn't want to, but because life had demanded all of her strength and left no room for dreams. He didn't tell her about his wealth. To her, he was just Ethan, a kind man who helped organize charity drives and served soup at the shelter. A man who showed up, who remembered birthdays, who listened. The little girl, Sophie, quickly grew fond of him. She started saving a seat for him in church, calling him Mr. Ethan, and beaming every time he walked through the doors. One rainy evening, after walking them home under a shared umbrella, Sophie looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Are you going to be our angel?" He laughed softly. "Why would you say that?" "Because mommy's been smiling more since you came. And I prayed for someone to make her smile." Ethan couldn't respond. His throat tightened. That night, he lay awake, looking at the ceiling, questioning everything he thought he wanted from life. He'd spent decades building empires, collecting houses he never lived in, and buying art he never appreciated. Yet in this small town, with a woman who had nothing and a little girl with everything that mattered, he'd found what he had unknowingly longed for, belonging. Months passed. Their bond deepened, not in a whirlwind romance kind of way, but like roots intertwining beneath the soil, steady and real. Ethan asked Anna to dinner, and she said yes. They talked for hours, not about money or success, but about pain, resilience, childhood dreams, and hopes that once felt too far away. One evening, he finally told her who he really was, the companies he owned, the fortune he had built. Anna listened quietly and said, "You being here, helping us carry groceries and fixing the heater, that means more to me than any number in a bank account." For the first time in his life, Ethan felt seen, not for his wealth or his reputation, but for his heart. Then came Christmas Eve. The church glowed with candlelight and hymns. Sophie wore a red dress, twirling down the aisle, excited about the holiday. After the service, as snow began to fall, Ethan knelt by the nativity scene and turned to Anna. "I came here by accident," he said. "But I stayed because I found a prayer answered, and I think I'm part of the answer, too. Anna, would you give me the honor of being the man Sophie prayed for?" Tears welled in Anna's eyes, and her lips trembled into a smile. She reached for his hand and whispered, "We've been waiting for you." The three embraced beneath the glowing church windows as snow blanketed the quiet town. Inside that sacred space, a prayer had been whispered by a child and answered in the most unexpected way. Sophie, who didn't quite understand the magnitude of the moment, simply smiled and said, "Thank you, God." And somewhere in the heavens, perhaps an angel smiled back. They didn't become a fairy tale overnight. There were hard days and adjustments. But there was also laughter echoing through their small house, warmth at the dinner table, and the comfort of knowing they were no longer alone. Ethan never went back to his old life. He sold some of his businesses and used his wealth to fund scholarships and healthcare programs for single parents and children in need. But most of all, he focused on the little family that saved him, the one he never knew he needed. And every Sunday, in the same pew of that little church, sat a mother, her daughter, and the man who had once sat in silence, now holding their hands, with his heart finally full. Sometimes, the smallest prayers bring the biggest miracles. And sometimes, love doesn't come with fireworks, but with a whispered plea in a quiet church, heard not just by God, but by a soul ready to listen.